You won't believe what happened that night. Murder and betrayal like never before. My name is Alexander, and up until that night, I thought I lived a pretty ordinary life. I'm in my early 30s, a typical office worker. No wild adventures, no major struggles, just a routine that kept me moving forward. I had a job I didn't love, a small apartment in the city, and friends who were always there for me. But that all changed after the phone call. It came late, around midnight. The phone rang twice, and when I picked it up, all I heard was heavy breathing. I almost hung up, assuming it was just some prank call. But then the voice spoke. "Are you alone?" it asked, in a whisper so cold that it sent chills down my spine. I froze. I didn't know who it was, but something in my gut told me that this wasn't some random caller. The voice seemed too familiar, too haunting. I was too scared to answer right away, but I managed to mumble a nervous, "Yes." "Don't go to work tomorrow. Don't leave the house. Trust no one," the voice warned, and before I could ask any questions, the line went dead. I was left staring at the phone in confusion, my heart racing. What was that? And why had they told me to stay home? I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than I could ever imagine. Little did I know, this was only the first warning. The calm before the storm. The next day, I woke up with a feeling of dread that I couldn't shake. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't even want to leave the safety of my apartment. The voice from last night kept echoing in my head, the warning still fresh in my mind. Don't go to work tomorrow. Don't leave the house. Trust no one. It felt irrational to take it seriously, but I couldn't deny the fear creeping over me. I spent the morning pacing around my apartment, trying to convince myself it was just some sick joke. But something inside me kept telling me to listen to the voice. So, I called in sick to work. I didn't give them a reason. They'd never questioned me before. It wasn't long before I started hearing strange noises, faint taps at my front door, a soft scratching on the walls. My heart pounded, but I told myself it was just the building settling. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was out there. Then the phone rang again. I nearly jumped out of my skin, my pulse quickening. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew, without a doubt, that I had to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaking. This time, the voice on the other end was different. It was calm, almost too calm. "Listen closely," the voice said. "You've been warned, but now things are going to get worse. The person you trust the most is lying to you. They're not who they say they are." I felt my stomach drop. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Who could it be? Who could I trust? My mind immediately went to my closest friend, Mark. We'd known each other for years. Was it possible that he was involved in this somehow? "I don't trust anyone, Alexander, not even Mark," the voice added, as if reading my thoughts. I froze, panic clawing at my throat. What was happening to me? Who was behind this, and what did they want? I couldn't sit still. The walls of my apartment, once comforting and familiar, now felt like a prison. The voice was right, I couldn't trust anyone. But I had to know who was behind all of this, who had the power to invade my mind like this, to manipulate me with nothing but words. I called Mark. His phone rang several times before he picked up, and when he did, his voice sounded normal, almost too normal. "Hey man, you okay?" he asked, his tone light and casual. "Yeah, I don't know. Mark, something weird's going on," I said, my words tumbling out in a rush. "I got the call last night, and it said I shouldn't trust anyone, that I should stay home today. It said even he might be lying to me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Too long. "Are you serious right now?" Mark finally replied, his voice edging with concern. "That sounds like something from a movie, man. Just relax, alright? You've been working too hard lately." "I know how it sounds, but it felt real, Mark," I said, my voice cracking. "I can't explain it. I don't know if I should believe you, or if I should be afraid." There was silence for a moment before Mark spoke again. "Listen, man, you're scaring me. Just stay calm. We can talk later. I have to go. Something's come up." I didn't even get a chance to respond before he hung up. I sat there, the phone still pressed against my ear, my pulse racing. Something didn't feel right. The way he'd said something's come up didn't sit well with me. It was like he was avoiding something, or worse, like he was trying to cover something up. I knew I had to find out what was really going on, and I couldn't trust anyone. Not even Mark. But who could I turn to? Who could I ask for help without risking putting myself in even greater danger? That evening, I couldn't take it anymore. My mind was a mess, and every shadow in my apartment seemed to whisper secrets I wasn't ready to hear. I had to figure out who was behind this, who was toying with my life like a puppet on strings. I needed answers, but I didn't know where to turn. I couldn't go to the police. What would I even say? I got a mysterious phone call, and now I'm scared to leave my apartment. No one would take me seriously, but I couldn't ignore it either. The threat felt real, too real to brush off. I decided to take a bold step. I grabbed my coat, stuffed my phone into my pocket, and left my apartment. I didn't know where I was going, but I had a feeling that if I stayed cooped up inside any longer, I'd lose my mind. I made my way to Mark's place. Maybe he could explain himself. Maybe the phone call was just some elaborate prank. I had to know. As I approached his apartment building, a sense of unease crawled up my spine. It wasn't that it was late, it was the stillness of the night. There was something wrong in the air, like a fog of dread hanging over the city. I pressed the buzzer to Mark's apartment. No response. I tried again. Not then. I thought about calling him again, but something in the pit of my stomach told me that wasn't going to help. I needed to see for myself, to face the truth. I checked the building's entrance. The door was ajar, a small sliver of light spilling into the darkness. I didn't hesitate. I slipped inside. The elevator ride felt like it took forever, the creaking of the old metal cables the only sound that filled the silence. When I reached his floor, I found his door cracked open too. My heart began to race as I stepped inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Mark was there, but he wasn't alone. In the dim light, I could make out two figures both wearing dark clothes, their faces obscured. One of them was holding something shiny glinting in the low light. I couldn't breathe. What was happening? Before I could move, one of the figures turned, and I recognized the voice immediately. It was the same voice from the phone call. The same cold whisper. "You shouldn't have come here, Alexander," it said, the words like ice in my veins. I stood frozen, my body refusing to move, my mind screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. I had to know. I had to see who these people were, and why they were involved in my life. What was Mark doing with them? The man who had spoken stepped forward, his face still hidden in the shadows, but his presence was undeniable. He was tall, his movements slow and deliberate. "You've been asking too many questions," the voice continued, this time with a sinister edge. "We warned you to stay out of this. Now, there's no turning back." I felt a rush of adrenaline flood my system, but I couldn't escape. The door was behind me, but the other figure, also cloaked in darkness, had moved in front of it, blocking my way. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. The man chuckled softly, but it wasn't a comforting sound. "We're the ones who make sure things stay in order. Things you don't understand, Alexander." I was no longer sure what was happening, but it felt like my life was spiraling out of control. There was no going back now. They knew too much. Mark, who had been eerily silent until now, finally spoke. "I didn't want this for you, man. I really didn't." I turned to him, my mind reeling. "What the hell is going on? Mark, what are they talking about?" Mark avoided my gaze, staring down at the floor, clearly conflicted. He finally muttered something I couldn't quite hear. But then the figure who had spoken earlier, the one with the cold voice, stepped closer to me and raised a hand, silencing Mark. "I think it's time you knew the truth," the man said, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, old-fashioned key. "You've been looking for answers, but you never knew the right question. The truth isn't what you think it is. It never has been." I didn't know what to make of it. What key was he holding? Why was this all happening? Then, in a split second, the man shoved the key into my hand, his fingers cold and firm against mine. "Find the door, find what's been hidden from you all this time. The answers are there. But be careful, some doors, once opened, can never be closed." My mind was spinning. What the hell was he talking about? A door? Hidden answers? It was all too much. But before I could say anything, the man and the other figure vanished into the shadows, leaving me standing there with the key in my hand and the unmistakable feeling that my life was about to change forever. I stood there for a few moments, frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. My fingers clenched around the key. The cold metal felt almost alive in my hand, like it had some kind of energy of its own. My thoughts were racing. What door? What was hidden? What was I supposed to do with this key? I turned to Mark, desperate for answers, but he was already backing away, his eyes wide with fear. "Mark!" I shouted, but he didn't respond. He just continued to move toward the door, his face twisted with anxiety. "I can't help you anymore, Alex," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted you involved in this. You should have just stayed away." "Mark, what the hell is going on?" I screamed, the frustration and fear finally breaking through. "Who were they? Why did they do this to me?" Mark glanced over his shoulder, his eyes filled with regret. "I don't know everything, man, but they've been watching you for a long time. They know everything about you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Who were these people? Why me? And why had Mark been involved? I took a step forward, trying to get closer, to force him to tell me more, but before I could, Mark turned and ran out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him. I stood there alone, in the middle of Mark's empty apartment, the silence deafening. The key in my hand felt heavier than before. There was no turning back now. I couldn't ignore the voice, the warning, the chilling words that had been repeated over and over. "Find the door." I looked around the apartment, searching for any clue, any hint of what that could mean. I scanned the walls, the floor, the furniture, but nothing stood out. It was as if everything in this place was just a facade, a cover-up for something darker lurking beneath the surface. Then I spotted it, a small, faded door near the back of the apartment. It was hidden behind a bookshelf, almost as if someone had tried to conceal it. My heart raced, the air thick with anticipation and dread. I walked toward it slowly, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The key in my hand was burning hot now, almost searing my skin. I knew what I had to do. I inserted the key into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a staircase that led down into darkness. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring into the impenetrable darkness below. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn back, to forget this madness, and walk away, but I couldn't. I had come this far. I had no choice but to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. I stepped forward, my hand gripping the railing as I descended into the black void. Each step felt heavier than the last, the silence around me suffocating, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. The air down here was cold, unnaturally cold, and it felt as if it was pressing in from all sides. The staircase seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually I reached the bottom. The room was dimly lit by a single, flickering light bulb. As I stepped further into the space, my heart skipped a beat. The walls were covered in photographs, dozens, maybe hundreds each one, featuring me taken from different angles at different times in my life. There were photos of me as a child, a teenager, and most disturbingly, recent ones. My life had been documented in a way that was chilling, personal, invasive. I stumbled back, panic seizing my chest. How had they gotten these? Who had been watching me? Then, my eyes locked onto a large desk in the center of the room. On it sat a laptop open and waiting. My hands were trembling as I approached, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know what was on it. I opened the laptop and the screen flickered to life. What I saw made my stomach churn. It was a video of me, but not from any moment I could remember. I was in the background, sitting at a bar, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. But that wasn't the worst part. In the corner of the screen, there was a timestamp. And the timestamp was from 3 weeks ago, the same night I got the first phone call. I hit play. The woman in the video leaned in close to me, whispering something I couldn't hear. But her lips were forming a word, a name. My name. Alexander, she said, but it wasn't my voice that answered back. It was Mark's. I felt the blood drain from my face as I watched, completely frozen in disbelief. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Mark hadn't just been involved, he was the one behind this. He was the one orchestrating it all. Suddenly, the door behind me slammed shut with a deafening thud, and I whipped around, my heart pounding. Standing in the doorway was Mark. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "It's too late, Alex," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't want you to find out this way. I never wanted you involved, but they made me do it." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything. What had Mark done? What was this? And who were they? But before I could ask, Mark stepped forward, holding something in his hand, a small black device. "I'm sorry, Alex," he whispered. I didn't have a choice. The last thing I heard was the sound of a button being pressed. And then everything went black.